prologue, before this conversation even starts in earnest, I want to make a special shout out to some inspirational people who told me that I'm not a real druid, not really an animist, and that I'm not in right relationship with nature because I kill bugs. Because I killed a mosquito in a video called Living Druidry that I recorded outside about a year ago, and I simply didn't want to get bit by a mosquito, and that was enough for people who I thought were joking and then I realized are actually just batshit insane, to tell me that I'm not in right relationship with nature. So you guys are going to love this one. This video is for you. Special shout out. Hello YouTube, this is Awen of Primal Druidry, and today I'm going to be talking about my journey from being a lifelong plant-based vegetarian since childhood for life until I eventually got stricter into veganism, until I broke out of that, until I became the bloody redmouth, unabashed redmouth carnivore that I am today. So I'm going to talk about the factors that went into that, a summary of my background, and mostly I want to talk about this for the other carnivores, for the other omnivores, for especially pagan, spiritual, at least vital type carnivorous individuals who refuse to give any ground on the idea that somehow veganism has a moral monopoly, especially in alternative religion, alternative spirituality, where we revere nature. I specifically want to talk about this not because I have any desire to debate anyone, and let me be very clear, I'm not scared of y'all vegans. I'm just bored. I know what you have to say. I was you. I know your arguments in and out because they used to come out of my own mouth. I'm talking about this because as a druid, as a primal druid, as someone who is just passionately religious in my own wild pagan fashion, I am sick and tired of people that are free to, do as you wish. I live in America. You're free to be vegan if you want to. I am sick of the moral monopoly is really the only word that's coming to mind when it comes to veganism and paganism and acting like they are better than everyone else or they're the only ones that are revering nature properly. So I'm simply going to get into my experience. This video is no more and no less. Again, I understand this is probably a spicy topic for some of you. I really couldn't care less. If you want to be butthurt in my comments, feel free. It probably helps boost me in the algorithm or whatever. So if you don't like what I have to say, understand that commenting only helps me. So let's get right into it. I want to say the time I was like 5 years old, I've always had pets whenever I can. I've always loved animals, and I remember when I was 5, I for some reason thought that chicken nuggets were just chicken shaped. I didn't understand that they were made out of chicken. Someone told me that. I got extremely upset. I went vegetarian on the spot, said I was never going to eat meat. My mom, who funny enough is a vegetarian but never once pushed it on me. She thinks that meat is healthy to this day. She just doesn't do it herself. She got me to eat fish sticks by basically lying to me about what they were because I didn't want to eat even fish. I had a very strong ethical stance against it for really my entire life and up until rather recently. And as I want to say became 18-ish, maybe 17, so I really, it's kind of blending into each other. I got stricter to the point of going fully vegan. And every single time that somebody, I see it as defects, that you essentially defect from veganism, which I'm just going to come out the gate early on in the video and say I think it's a death cult. Because every single time that someone comes out of it and says, hey, this was deeply unhealthy for me, I was malnourished, I was depressed, I had severe health problems that were affecting me in a very serious way, inevitably, all of these lunatics just come out saying, well, you were doing it wrong. Also, it doesn't matter. You should be willing to forsake your own health and well-being to not eat animals, to not eat even animal products. these are people that can't even get their shit straight about eating honey. So, to be very clear, I was fully drinking the Kool-Aid. I was fully on board. I think I was, pardon me, around, I don't even remember, I want to say 24, when I started to even non-judgmentally consider the possibility, because I had friends that were pescatarian, and I had a rather serious crush on a woman who was a hugely unabashed meat eater, and a huge witch. And she would talk about how she very much loves animals, and she truly feels that she is absorbing their power and their strength, what they have to offer, by consuming them from a place of passionate love. And I was like, that's batshit insane. That part of my first response was, that's batshit insane. But I was listening, and there was something to it that stuck with me, that I sat with, and I just couldn't. I still wasn't ready to make the leap. I was still very bought into this like ethical thing. And something that I said the entire time that I was vegetarian and vegan, that I still say now, that I still hold now, is if you cannot bring yourself to kill an animal, you have no business eating them. That belief did not change. My willingness to do that changed. So the experience that really changed my life in this regard specifically was, and I've talked about this before, but sort of just as like a briefer thing in other videos, I was visiting my wonderful tattoo artist, goes by Biker Witch online, I think Crucified Out, who God knows, whatever his account is now, Pat of Vamachara Tattoo, if you're ever on the East Coast, incredible practitioner, artist. So I was visiting him and his wonderful lady, and they were taking me on a road trip to meet another close practitioner friend of his that he was tattooing. And the friend that he was taking me to meet, to visit, had this very farm to table, hunted to table, like very fresh, sourced food kind of restaurant. And this man had taken the time to prepare us very, very fresh fish. I think they might have been caught like just the day before by a friend of his. And this guy is a pagan. Like, he put his energy, his blessings, his effort into preparing, I want to say it was like fish and asparagus. And, you know, the friends I was visiting, like Pat and his lady, are pescatarian, if I recall correctly, unless anything drastic has changed. I doubt it. And I had been considering getting on that bandwagon, but I was still unsure. And then I saw all of the love that went into this. I saw how locally sourced it was. I saw if I was going to eat fish, this was the opportunity. This was the moment. Everything about it was right. Every part of it was fortuitous. It was such a wholesome environment. So I did. And it was sublimely delicious. And I have never looked back. I have gone significantly further than in pescatarian. If you sort of spelunk my social media, there's, photos of me eating raw heart. And, I'm not trying to be the female liver king here. I'm not on steroids of any kind. And it's kind of obvious. Like anyways. But that sort of topic is, that's related as well. So I had started a few years ago lifting weights, and I was doing this while still vegan. I started while I was still fully plant-based, and I can be a stubborn woman, but I gathered that I was spinning my wheels because I simply was not eating enough. And yes, I know there are vegan bodybuilders. I know there are people that are willing to shovel rice and beans and that unholy Frankenstein shit in their face all day. If you're willing to eat 10 times a day, the entire poundage of your body weight or whatever, God's bless you. Be my guest. Again, this is America. Do as you will. I truly don't care. I don't want to do that. I am not willing to do that. I think that's a miserable way to live. And ultimately, my own sort of spiritual awakening and my spiritual connection to eating meat is really that I thought deeply about it, and I had a lot of conversations with someone that I love dearly um, who used to really kind of shock me when I was still vegan by saying things like he wanted to eat meat that had a name, a face, and a family. And I was like, God, you're fucking morbid. But in hindsight, I respect the full ownership of what you are doing, because I don't respect the people that think that their hamburger came off of a tree. It very much does not. And to circle back to what I was saying, my spiritual connection is that this whole time I thought I was revering nature. I thought I was worshiping, honoring nature as divine by not partaking in animals, and eventually not even animal products. I might have gotten some cheeky honey in there towards the end, because I thought even that's where the critical thinking never entirely left me. I'm like, okay, this is a fucking stretch. Who cares? Why are we fighting about honey? What was I saying? But I got the feeling that I was not actually connecting more to nature. I got the sense that I was fully rejecting it, because I was rejecting not only the natural order, I was rejecting my nature. We are mammals. I am a human being. You know, it's very recent that we are even capable of being fully plant powered. And again, if people want to do that, do as you see fit. I'm not going to sit here and lecture anyone or be anyone's mother, but that's the difference between me and your average person that eats meat and people that are militantly, dogmatically vegan, especially when they are vegans that connect it to whatever they're calling their spirituality or their religion. And, you know, so I had this very powerful sort of awakening and reconnection to my own primal nature, to this is the cycle of life, death, life. And I got out of my own way. And I really want to say, like, when I was vegan, a lot of the time I was vegetarian as well, I was just malnourished. It was not healthy. And this is, to me, very funny. It's another point that a lot of vegans want to act like what they're doing is healthy, quote unquote, but their metric for health is just not being fat. And these are the same people that want to talk about body positivity and not being fat phobic, but their primary metric for health is simply not being fat. And there are so many more metrics to health than that. There are so many more metrics to well-being than that. And when I started eating meat and still with lifting weights, I finally put on healthy weight for the first time in my life. I had been the same weight since I was 15 years old into my early adulthood. And I think I gained, you know, in that sort of early meat eating period, I went from around 110, 115 to 130, which is relatively where I've been sitting since then. To me, that's been a very healthy weight. I feel more capable than ever. My whole fitness journey is a whole other thing. I have been way more inconsistent than I am proud to admit with that. But as far as the food element goes and taking care of myself, nourishing myself in that way, that is something that I will continue to do unrepentantly. And I want to get into it specifically in terms of my path being druidry. And I'm a very physically restless person. Sorry, you'll see me moving my hair around a lot because I don't like to sit still. I have never been someone that really needs historical permission to do what works for me magically, right? So like I'm not going to make any pretense at being some like historical reconstructionist. I've repeatedly spoken on why I don't think that even is an advisable goal. It doesn't make any sense. We don't have enough of history to base our practices on, what have you. And also I believe more in embodying the spirit of something rather than the letter of it. I think we miss on the soulful, like passionate aspect if we do that, to put it very, concisely. But when we do look to the history we do have, when we do look to the practices we do know for sure that the Druids did, it really makes this whole veganism is the pagan moral monopoly superior thing. It's completely absurd on its face, because the couple of practices that we know come to mind, we have very redmouthed meaty ones. So I'll just get into it. One of them, I won't butcher the pronunciation by saying the whole thing, but one of the ways to gain Imbas insight, to do divination, was to literally chew on a piece of raw flesh, raw red meat. You would chew it sort of repetitively until you reach this sort of trance state. That's one very simple, very intuitive practice. There's another far more majestic sounding one that has fallen completely by the wayside because we don't really have kings anymore, although hell, maybe I'll do it about my love life. The druids would do something to kind of predict the future of kingship, of sovereignty, to see who the next ruler would be. They would do something where a cattle, probably a cow, would be slaughtered, and they would wrap themselves in, I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. They would not only wrap themselves in the hide of the slaughtered animal after the fact, they would fully bathe and submerge themselves in the entire internal contents of the cow, and then would wrap themselves in the hide, and pertinent information as to the future ruler would come to them in that sort of prophetic dream state. Now, if I'm getting the details a little bit off in the order of those things, I'm including the links that we have for the information that we do have on those practices for you to peruse for yourself. I bring these up to say we don't have a ton of facts on a lot to do with druidry, but the fact is that the few facts we do have include not just meat eating, but involving meat in this divine process and this divinatory process in a portal between us and the gods. And that is no accident. That is not something to be scoffed at. And frankly, let's talk about this too. So my stance on human sacrifice with historical druidry, I occasionally like to sort of joke to, I can be a bit of a troll, I can be a bit of a trickster. In earnestness on my end, it's because I think that people learn that way. Druidry itself really is best as a sort of mystery tradition. It's best, being conveyed through story, through riddles, through mystery, through experience, and, satire and jokes and bardcraft. So sometimes I do that by having a little giggle. But I'm also kind of not completely joking about this. So I want to just start off by saying, again, druidry is not one of the most fantastically, historically kept practices on the face of the earth, to say the absolute least. However, we do have reason to believe that, at least at certain points in history, some of the druids ate people. Just straight up. There are, in the archaeology that we have found, there are certain, there are bones that were preserved in such a way that it seems like someone was sucking the marrow out of them at ceremonial sites. So there are some, edgy, infamous, historical sort of connotations of the druids as being cannibalistic. And I'm going to say this outright, I am not a historian. This is a woo-woo, UPG, personal insight, speculation, guess on my end. Don't come for me. But the feeling that I get is, for one, it's not like they were finding this across every corner of Ireland. This was not like they didn't find piles and piles and piles. My guess, my insight, speculation, is that this was done during periods of war, because when you think about it, the druids wore many hats. In some cases they were shamanic, in others they were really the intelligentsia, they were scholars, they upheld the law, they helped settle disputes in the community, and at other times, that meant at other times they were overseeing justice. And let's just think about this. This is where I'm really not trying to be edgy on purpose. I'm trying to use my noodle a little bit here, and if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But when you have people that are overseeing both, religious functions and also upholding justice, and they're at war, what are you going to do as a religious leader with prisoners of war or criminals? You're going to turn them into a human sacrifice, because how else do you bring people together? And this is really, making a spectacle of death is not pretty, but it is something that humans have really done as far back as I can remember, and frankly, not much has changed. In my view, we still do human sacrifice. It's called the death penalty. We just don't broadcast it in the public square anymore. So I really don't have a ton of patience for people kind of acting all holier than thou when we still do it today. Mind you, there's a strong degree of royal we there, and I get that we, as your average common person, doesn't have anything to do with that. but it bears thinking about in case we think that we're any better than the people of the past. So anyways, to get back to that, when it comes to the archaeological sort of implication of cannibalism, if you have these human sacrifices, these prisoners of war, people that are trying to destroy your way of life, why would you not absorb their power and presumably do some kind of baneful magic to protect your people? That is my guess. And frankly, I support them. I fully support them. I've said it before. I'll say it again. If we could do that to rapists specifically, as long as we know the person is guilty beyond a shadow of a doubt, we would be better off doing that to this day. I would, this is not a privilege, luxury, whatever cutesy abstract opinion on my end. I would be the one holding the knife. I am not a pacifist. And this is why I really talk about all this stuff, is I don't appreciate the fact that these very, very decidedly modern people are kind of just deciding on everyone's behalf that all of us have to be vegans, that all of us have to be vegetarian, that we're these tree-hugging pacifists. Absolutely not. I am devoted to a goddess of sovereignty and battle, the Morrigan. Please look into her. I never signed some kumbaya, treaty. I have been known to hug a tree here and there, especially when I'm on certain fungal substances, but I never agreed to that. And the thing is, paganism by default, in my view, is anti-consensus. It is predicated on, let's talk about what pagan actually means. Pagan doesn't mean some specific belief set. It does not mean even necessarily polytheist. What pagan originally actually means is basically backwards country person. It's another way of saying hick. It's these backwards primitive people that are rural, they live on the countryside, and they are too dumb and primitive to just get with the times and convert to a more civilized, sophisticated religion. Now, I personally have nothing against truly, mystical, potent Christianity. I think that most, I'll just quote Nietzsche, there was only one Christian and he died on the cross. His so-called followers do a terrible job of whatever it is they're trying to do. But what I'm basically saying is the word pagan itself, it's not even a definitive category. It's basically just, it's predicated on a non-definition. So even if we're going to take that as, and I tend to take pagan to mean, modern polytheist. I think a lot of us use it that way, presumably non-Hindu. That's for other people to discuss, not me. Pardon, I'm getting all crackly. But what I'm saying here is that, John Beckett, another ADF druid, has talked about this sort of big tent metaphor for paganism, where it encompasses a wide variety of different practices that do not necessarily entail any agreement or consensus with each other. So anytime you want to say we, anytime you want to dictate anything to do with any of this, make that I. There is no we. You can talk about yourself, and you can talk about your kindred community, people that have signed on to whatever your beliefs are, to whatever your way of life is, whatever you guys are about. You can voluntarily agree to do that together. But you do not define paganism, you do not define polytheism, you definitely don't define druidry when we have clear, hard precedent for eating meat, for doing divination with meat, for eating our fucking enemies. So that's really the bulk of my opinions in that regard. And so part of why, one of the many, many, many reasons that I said fuck it and started doing what I call Primal Druidry is because the issue with public-facing ritual is that inevitably you are going to encounter people who want to make that I into a we. And this becomes a problem when even what we use, quote, we use as offerings is going to diverge wildly. Now, I'm going to be very direct. I use meat as an offering. Even before I was eating it, for the record, I recognized that I do not serve a pacifist, passive goddess. And even before I ate meat, I was still willing to handle it, or at least I would have someone that I was working with handle it if I wasn't willing to at the time. Obviously, at this point, things have drastically changed. But, closer to the present, when I am using meat as an offering in a group working of any kind, I'm not necessarily asking anyone else to touch it, to handle it. It is not to be eaten, period. So if you are uncomfortable handling meat, you don't have to. And for the record, offerings are not something that I even want the bulk of the group touching anyways. Like, specific offerings are for whoever is handling it. So typically, I've discussed this a little bit, the general broadest strokes of the framework that I kind of work with is I recognize the three realms of land, sea, and sky. Those correlate to gods, nature spirits, and ancestors, not necessarily in that order. And the three cauldrons of life, vocation, and wisdom. Or cauldron of the heart is called a few different things. But anyways, so I tend to have at least 3 major offerings, and then an additional one for what we call the outdwellers. This is something I like that Arnriosfane, that ADF does, is they recognize the importance of being hospitable, even to what is quote-unquote inhospitable to you, to the forces of destruction that might not really like what you're up to, that might not, approve of whatever you're doing, but you invoke the law of hospitality and you still pour one out. You make some kind of offering for the forces of chaos so that hopefully they do not fuck with you, at least for the duration of your ritual, of your working. And I love that. So I personally like to use, depending on my budget at the time, the highest quality red meat that I can get. I have gotten truly bewildering weird shit from people for using crappier cuts of meat when I was in fucking poverty. Like, I don't know how else to say that. I would be delighted to offer, $80, the most expensive ribeye that you possibly can. That's not always in the cards for me. So it's truly, this is where you have to say fuck it and just make your own path, because people will talk shit about anything. People will talk shit at you for using meat as an offering at all. Some people will talk shit at you and act like you're crazy for not using the kind of meat that they personally approve of, if you're simply too broke to get something beyond like chicken. It's really, you have to know your own values, and that is something that I would like to continue to talk about. So this is a deeply held value for me. This is a deeply held principle for me that I have gone full circle on, and that is why I don't have a ton of patience. It's one thing for someone to simply disagree. I welcome disagreement. I like a wide diversity of different lifestyles, opinions, what have you. It genuinely takes all kinds, and this is part of, it's another reason why I don't love, for example, Dianic Wicca, Dianic witchcraft. It might work out sometimes that it's just women that come to my stuff, but that's not a specific, gender segregation on my end, because I believe in balance. I want all the different forms of energy to do what they do. That's how you really have fun, to say the least. That's how you have potent energy. So I think I have said most of what I wanted to say on this, but just to double down again, I will not be guilted by vegans on this topic. And you know what? I forgot one point as well. So in another video that I just did, I spoke about the Dedicant Path in Arnriosfane and my completion of it, and one of the essay segments was specifically on basically an environmental practice, your relationship to the nature spirits in a real sense, not just the symbolic, whatever that might be to you, but the actual physical, what is your relationship to your local regional environment? How do you engage with that, etc.? It was important to me to talk about my journey into eating meat, my deliberate, conscious, mindful practice around eating meat, which has become deeply spiritual for me. And one of the ways that I do that is I go out of my way to focus on, primarily I like to eat bison. I like to find whatever I'm eating, I try and make sure that it is not factory farmed. It is sourced as locally as possible, that I can trace it back to, as my rather diabolical loved one said, I want to know its name, its face, its family. Like, knowing where it came from. And that isn't like a morbid, sadistic, weirdo thing, as it struck me at the time. It's total, complete ownership of that life and death cycle that we are participating in as members of the animal kingdom. So I am a fan, if they want to sponsor me, that'd be cool, of Force of Nature. It's a meat company. I buy bison from them, and they talk a lot about regenerative agriculture. And I think it is very, very important for meat eaters, if you want to call them producers, to really talk about how you don't have to. Vegans are not the only one that have a problem with factory farming. I still think it's deeply evil. And something that I can't remember what episode this was, but while I might not be a huge Joe Rogan listener simply because I don't care about the DMT aliens, I just don't want to hear about it, he went off on this rather cool sort of tangent about how factory farming is stealing the soul of an animal. And this wasn't even what the episode was really about. This was kind of unprompted. But he was talking about his experience as a hunter, as someone that eats what he kills. And that factory farming is just like, animals should live in dignity, in, being cared for as much as possible, and then eventually have one bad day, as he puts it. And I fully concur with that. There is no reason that, animals should be kept in tiny confinement and tortured until they die. The word is evil. And I get that, the non-meat eaters amongst us are going to say that eating animals at all is evil. And, you guys are part of the balance too. I don't agree with you. Or rather, I've moved past that sort of point. But we kind of do need people that are, and I say this as neutrally as possible, that are that kind of soft, that are a little gentler in their disposition in that way. I don't think that everyone, shocker, people are not the same. I don't believe in pushing or bullying anyone into anything. You should let people be who they are. But that takes me back to, for those of us that are bloody redmouths, don't try to guilt me. Don't try to manipulate me. Don't try to use any of those weird culty tactics on me, because I know them all. So I think now I've said everything that I wanted to say. But I would be curious from people that have thoughts of substance to contribute. I would be very happy to hear them. If you want to hate comment, again, it really just only benefits me. I'm probably not going to respond because it's a waste of my time. And I'm not someone that enjoys debate for its own sake. Like, I'll do it. You might catch me in a zesty mood once in a while. But for the most part, I care about an empathetic, truly thoughtful exchange of ideas. I want to hear from people that have deeply reflected on their position, and at the bare minimum, even if it's not some ethical thing with them, to just understand human nature well enough to know that we don't change our minds from being fucking bullied. We don't change our minds from having people morally grandstand at us. We do not change our minds from being patronized and belittled, which are all tactics that the more militant vegans love to do. I'm not saying all of them. I'm saying the militant, annoying ones that I didn't even like when I was vegan. And I know full well that there are plenty of vegans that don't care for that shit. And, Godspeed. But yeah, so feel free to comment if you have something hopefully useful to say. I am going to try and turn some fans on in this place. Southern California has a unique relationship to the seasons in that I really fully believe our dark times, as it were, are the summer, because the wheel of the year as we think of it is kind of based on, not kind of, it's directly based on British weather, where, winter is this dangerously oppressive weather conditions where if you go outside you could die because snow, what have you. We have that where in the summer you're at risk of fucking heat stroke where it's been over 100 multiple days in a row, and if you don't have AC you are literally cooked. So I have been discussing this with also a newly carnivorous or newly re-carnivorous my good friend, I call her my bard-in-chief, we've been discussing for quite a while now how we feel that the Wheel of the Year, I personally still like the narrative journey of it, but the actual times of where those seasons and their correlations go are not the same across the board. And part of developing a living, active, fully alive, primal relationship to your druidry, your spirituality, pardon all the hiccups, it should be based on where you are on your real life. So I have been, as I said, really viewing the summer and the sort of last vestige of summer that is really just making itself known still in September as the dark times, and I see more of the, classical fall and winter as the, quote, bright times, that whole Samos, Skiamos, summer and winter, light and dark sort of combination that you see in the Celtic reckoning of seasons as well. So I am looking forward to our our bright times, our Witches' New Year beginning, where we can actually enjoy going outside because we're not getting beat to shit by the sun. So anyways, if you made it this far, thank you for listening. Whatever your perspective is, I appreciate you hearing me out. And if you would like to hear more of my various druidic perspective, I greatly appreciate subscribers. And again, leave insane comments if you want to. It doesn't, again, it just benefits me. If you would like to support me directly, you can do so for less than the price of a cup of coffee. If you live in a sane place or insane place, you can support me for $3. I am losing steam so rapidly. I've been goofy this entire sort of heat-stroked out week, so I'm going to stop talking now. But YouTube, Patreon, Primal Druidry, you guys are delightful. Thank you kindly.